we are so excited to begin the formal programming for ASF's Policy Forum with a fireside chat with the Honorable Nani Coloretti on the topic of innovation and the federal enterprise. It is my pleasure to introduce Session Chair Stephen Kivelson, who is the Prabhu Goel Family Professor of Physics and ASF Fellow, who will introduce this session.
Thank you, Gisela, for that kind introduction. In this fireside conversation, the Honorable Nani A. Coloretti sits down with Dr. Arun Majumdar for a rare look inside the machinery of the American government. The Honorable Nani Coloretti is Cabinet Secretary to California Governor Gavin Newsom, former Deputy Director of the U.S. Office of Management and Budget, OMB, former Deputy Secretary of the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, and the highest-ranking Filipino-American ever to serve in the executive branch of the U.S. government. Professor Arun Majumdar is the inaugural Dean of the Stanford Doerr School of Sustainability and the J. Precourt Professor and founding director of ARPA-E. Drawing on her leadership at OMB, HUD, and the Treasury Department, and his at the frontier of federal research and innovation, the two will explore how the federal enterprise actually works, how budget priorities impact the probability of discovery, how the quiet rules of grant policies shape what science gets done, and how government can balance accountability with the expert-driven processes that give federal decisions their credibility and their efficacy. From the changing role of the OMB to the predictability that research universities need, this is a conversation about the part of government that most Americans never see, but every American and every U.S. scientist depends on. Please join me in welcoming our moderator, Arun Majumdar, and our keynote speaker, the Honorable Nani Coloretti.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you. There are too many chairs over here.
I know, we're trying to. Okay, thank you.
All right.
We realized
right in the
before,
middle somewhere.
They just put the mic on me, so hopefully it's working.
Good morning. It's really a pleasure and honor to have you here, Nani, and I know we're going to go into lots of discussions about OMB and the policy world, et cetera, but let's just start with you first.
Okay.
You were born in Hawaii, grew up in Hawaii?
So I was born in San Francisco, and I moved to Hawaii when I was 3 months old, so I have a place here and a place there. Yeah.
And so tell us about your journey in Hawaii, starting from there.
How long do you have?
Yeah.
No, just kidding. So my grandparents came from the Philippines to Hawaii in 1929. It's my mom's parents. My grandfather was a minister, a Protestant minister, and became later a union organizer. My grandmother was one of the first Filipina nurses in the country. My dad is Italian and Spanish, and his parents came from Italy and Spain. So my parents met in San Francisco, which is why I was born there. And then we moved back to Hawaii, where my mom's family was, and that's where I grew up. So just a little, it's confusing, but that's why my last name is Coloretti, from my dad's side. So I went to high school there, and I went to college on the East Coast, went back to Hawaii and actually worked for a little while on the state budget there, and then went to graduate school at UC Berkeley, go Bears. I was told I needed to say that here at Stanford University. So I had to say that. But I went there in the policy school, the Goldman School of Public Policy. And right after that, I became a career analyst at the Office of Management and Budget for about 3 years. So this is the Clinton administration. So that's how old I am. Came back to California, worked in consulting for a couple of years, and then spent 10 years in the city and county of San Francisco. The last 4 of those working for the new mayor there, Gavin Newsom. And I was his policy director and his budget director, and I coordinated finance and cross-cutting initiatives in the city and county. And then when we faced the Great Recession, it got a little difficult to do my job, but we came through it reasonably okay in San Francisco. But I got a call from DC when Barack Obama took office, asking me to come to the Treasury Department to help with the Recovery Act and other things that we were doing that then new President Obama was doing. So I went to Treasury, kind of picked up and moved back to the East Coast, and worked at Treasury for about 6 years, and then worked on the Recovery Act, kind of bailing out the economy, and the Dodd-Frank Act, which some of you may or may not be familiar with, but was doing regulatory reform for the financial industry, and helped create a new agency called the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And then after I did that work, got called over to become the Senate-confirmed Deputy Director of Housing and Urban Development. So I was kind of asked to go over there and help make what the Obama administration wanted to have happen in housing policy, actually make it, kind of solidify it and make it happen. And so we can talk a little bit more about that. In between the Obama and Biden administrations, I went to a think tank, Urban Institute, largely social scientists, so I know mostly here are hard, kind of like our hard sciences, but was at Urban Institute helping them navigate the kind of Trump administration, the first one. And then when Biden came into office, became the Senate-confirmed Deputy Director, so number 2, at the Office of Management and Budget. Very long story of career, lots of different stories in between there. When Biden left office, the governor asked me to come back, and I agreed to come back to California, where I'm in a position called Cabinet Secretary, and that it's basically a role in the governor's office. Think of it like I'm Chief Operating Officer for the governor and for the state of California, and I help do cross-cutting initiatives. Really, my job right now is if something is not working, it comes to my desk. And I help solve problems. So that's really, I'm just a problem solver, bottom line.
That's an amazing journey, and just what a stellar career that you have had in public service. And talking about Go Bears, thank God we believe in First Amendment at Stanford. And I'm also a Cal Bear myself, a PhD out there.
You have a foot in each place, though.
Let's go to OMB, because I think many of our faculty write proposals to National Science Foundation, NIH, Department of Energy, et cetera. Yeah. But OMB is this mysterious little organization in the White House. So, just explain to us, what is OMB?
I can do that. And I've done 2 stints there now, one as a career staffer and one as a political appointee. And it was just really a pleasure to come back there after some 20 years, having been there the last time. OMB is a little known, very powerful organization inside of the executive offices of the president. It is far more than the budget. So we're in a university, so I'm going to give you a little bit of history if you'll indulge me for a second. In 1921, the then president started the Bureau of the Budget, and it used to sit inside Treasury. And it really did, it was just starting to coordinate, sort of budget asks across the whole administration that had not been done before. It sort of grew into what it is over time. So it became an independent, well, not independent, it's actually got moved into the president's office in 1939. And so it is right now the largest part of the executive offices of the president. And in 1970 became the Office of Management and Budget. So it's important for me to use the management word here, because that is actually what is affecting a lot of what you're dealing with today in research and in funding. There are a lot of authorities at OMB. When I worked there, it's about the same size as when I worked there as a career staffer. It's about 500 to 550 analysts across all areas of government. It is inside of the president's executive office of the president. However, almost all of those staff are career. So that's one interesting thing about OMB, is that There's a layer of political appointees, but really it's career staff. And in fact, when I returned in the Biden administration, a lot of the people I had worked with 20 years before were still there. They were the branch chiefs, they were the division directors of the Office of Management and Budget. So it has it's the institutional memory for the president. A lot of presidents come into office and don't trust OMB because OMB had been working for the prior president. So if it's a party changeover, it's difficult, in the transition. But over time, presidents come to understand what the usefulness is of having these kinds of experts there to help them with their agenda. So OMB does several kinds of work. One is what you're probably think of when you think of the Office of Management and Budget, which is both formulating and executing the president's budget. And that's in partnership with Congress. Congress still has the purse strings and the power of appropriation, but OMB does a lot of work there in the budget space. However, in the management space, authorities grew up over time at the Office of Management and Budget. And think of OMB as if you were a company, a large company, OMB is like the HQ of the company, okay? So there's people there who are tracking performance metrics across government, and all policy for how you govern, how you implement things goes through OMB. So it's in charge of personnel policy, procurement policy, how we buy things. Technology policy is at OMB. And so it is quite powerful in how you manage and execute across the government. And then the third area of OMB that is little known but known to people who have to interact with it is the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs. All regulations of significance go through the Office of Management and Budget. And so that comes to a final kind of way to think about the Office of Management and Budget, which is it is in charge of sort of running process across the entire government to get something done, whether it's an executive order, a statement of administration policy, the budget, or regulation. OMB has people who are supposed to be running sort of fair, transparent, and accountable processes to get those deliverables completed and also to help manage the government.
So it's really kind of the control center for the executive branch.
Yes,
It's
Biden called it the nerve center.
The nerve center.
The nerve center of the government, and I spent the whole 4 years of the Biden administration calling it the nerd center of government because somebody misheard him and thought they meant that was where all the nerds were, which is also true. Yeah.
But it's very powerful.
Yeah.
In fact, just as the budgeting process, I remember when I was in DOE, we were really kind of debating with OMB around about the fall quarter or the winter, trying to decide what the budget proposal is going to be from the president.
Yeah.
So tell us about your negotiations with the agency, because the faculty out here write proposals to DOE or NSF.
That's right.
So, but what is that behind the scenes, that debate that happens?
So it's it's a process that's been developed over many decades. It is very similar to when I was there, again, in the Clinton administration. So it is a rigorous process. At different levels of OMB, in the branch and in the division, you start formulating the budget, honestly, around the summer and fall. And then you start to debate, as you recall properly, like in the winter, as the issues start to elevate up into a series of what we call director's reviews. And that's where, at the time, Shalanda Young, the director, and myself would sit and go through every single part of the budget. And so issues usually get worked out at the staff level, but if not, then appeals start coming in at different levels, and usually if there's something that is a big disagreement between and amongst the staff, the appeal will come in more than one way. The thing about the White House is over time it has also grown in size. It has several policy apparatus. I think it's different, by the way, in Trump 2.0, but I'll just speak for Obama and Biden and honestly Clinton. There's a Domestic Policy Council, there's a National Economic Council, National Security Council. Some of these places have been, a lot of staff have left, but again, a mixture of career and political staff. Those policy councils inside of the White House also work across government and with the Office of Management and Budget, especially if there are issues of disagreement, like whether we should build more ships or not. We had a lot of discussions about that, I remember, in the research space as well. And so there's sort of the direct process, and then there's other incoming and input as we create that. The president's budget usually goes out in February, either January or February of the following of the year before the federal fiscal year starts. So
the State of the Union speech.
Yes, the president does a State of the Union, and then 1 week later the budget comes out. So that's the normal process. Process has not been normal in appropriations for quite some time. So even we sit here today, we're not likely to get any appropriations that are full year because we kick things over to Congress. And remember, the fiscal year starts on October 1. We haven't passed appropriations on time
since
for
a long
25
time.
years,
Yeah,
20,
that's
30
right.
years. So there's usually something called a continuing resolution. And budget, because of all of this, and also shutting down the government or parts of the government and open because they don't have appropriations and opening them back up, budgeting is really kind of year-round. But it's important to remember the other pieces of OMB's kind of portfolio, because these are all just tools. Okay, so if you want to figure out, for me, I come up through the budget and finance world. So if I want to find out how to run something or how to do something, I follow the money. I try to figure out where it is, how did it get there, what's happening, what are the trade-offs. But there are other levers as well, how you hire people, how you buy things, how you issue grants, how you regulate or enforce. Okay, so these are all just levers and tools to help the government work. And if any company has these same tools, I have sat on boards of banks, I've seen the same kinds of tools. And it's really just like, how do you manage a large operation, right? But the budget is probably the strongest tool because it is a must-pass legislation. And so things get hooked onto it all the time. And so that's what makes it difficult, to kind of get a budget passed on time.
So the budget then, when it comes out from OMB, that is a budget proposal. For example,
Right.
Last year we saw the NSF budget cut by 50%.
Right.
That's the OMB budget. That's not the final budget.
Yes.
That's just the start of a
Yes.
negotiation.
It's the beginning.
It's a beginning.
It kicks off everything. That's what's called the president's budget, right? There's two lines of thought on this. One is the president's budget goes to Congress and then gets thrown in the trash can because Congress has the power of appropriation. The real answer about what does you do with the president's budget is it is a starting point, but accompanying the president's budget is a whole bunch of process, language. The Congress's budget office, the Congressional Budget Office, must analyze and score, which means how much does everything cost. They're the scorekeeper for the government, not OMB, but we talk, OMB and CBO talk a lot. And so there's a lot of interesting information and useful information that comes out of the president's budget, but something dramatic like I'm gonna eliminate a whole agency or cut something in half, that's like, I'm not even sure that's a starting point. I think that's just like a policy view. Because appropriators in Congress have a lot of sway over what really happens in that process.
And so then the appropriation happens, and that's the law. That means the executive branch
Correct.
is supposed to spend
Yes.
the money in those line items that have been described,
Yes.
right?
I have something to say about that, but go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
There is something called the Impoundment Act. It's been around for many decades. It requires the president to spend what Congress appropriates. It is pretty crystal clear. And in fact, in 1974, after President Nixon tried to not spend some money that Congress appropriated, it was strengthened. Trump, in its first term, sort of started to not spend what Congress appropriated. You may recall funding for Ukraine. He directed OMB at the time. Russell Vought was the deputy director, directed OMB to not spend some money and was holding that up for unrelated negotiations that he was sort of having with Ukraine. All of that was found to be illegal. However, our system that we have, our check and balance system, which includes Congress, the president, and courts, moves very, very slowly to adjudicate something like that. So in Trump 2.0, there have been many, many Impoundment Act violations, many. And all of them are going to probably fail, or some of them have been enjoined, or the judge has said you have to spend this money. But it takes time and process. And that time and process, I mean, where are we right now in the administration? We're almost 2 years in. There's still probably money I would wager, would be released eventually. But it's going to take a minute. So the Impoundment Act, let me give you a different, so you can understand like how critical the Impoundment Act is. I spent 10 years in the city and county of San Francisco, 4 of those in the mayor's office. The mayor and the board of supervisors do the same thing. They negotiate a budget. They kind of duke it out over their policy priorities of what they want to fund. But for many, many reasons, and I think this is still the case, the mayor can decide to not spend or slow down the spending of something that the board of supervisors appropriated. Sometimes that's because, in a state government and in a local government, you must balance. You can't run a deficit. The federal government can run a deficit. So sometimes you have to have that flexibility as the mayor or as the executive to basically be like, I have to, and this happened in the Great Recession, we couldn't spend what was appropriated because we actually didn't have the money. That is not the case in the federal government. If Congress appropriates, you have to spend it. It's just that those norms and rules and laws are not being followed, and everything's getting adjudicated.
And since the judicial process takes time,
yeah,
and if the money is not spent, it goes back to the Treasury, which is essentially a budget cut that was originally proposed. Is that a fair statement?
No, because if it's found eventually that money should have been spent, it will be spent. So
even though it's
held
next
in
year
abeyance.
or a year later?
Yes,
Okay.
It doesn't like disappear. It is still in dispute, I guess I would say. But the dispute, again, unless the Supreme Court changes and they have been slowly changing the power of the executive and giving the president more power over time, they also, on the other hand, clip the power when the president has done something or is suggesting something that is unconstitutional or whatever. I'm not sure where these arguments will land, but should they not prevail in their Impoundment Act, the money would be required to be spent. So I don't think it goes away forever.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like held in abeyance in a way.
Well, as you said, I mean, OMB makes a lot of rules as well.
Yeah.
And they have recently come out with rulings about the review process, about political appointees making decisions. I was a political appointee. I made decisions.
Sure.
So tell us, looking at OMB, and you've looked at the federal government, multiple administration, how is this different? Is it different?
Yes.
Number one. And how is it so?
So I was also a political appointee at Housing and Urban Development. There's a difference between setting the mission goals and actually making a procurement decision that's following a process. And so this is where you'll have to. I'm sort of a cross between a bureaucrat and a policy person, so you'll have to indulge me again for a minute here. The reason why we have rules around how you give out grants and procurement is because we want to avoid graft and corruption. Graft and corruption happens when political appointees or the politically elected person is actually handpicking every single decision for funding. And you can imagine why that's a problem. It's a problem because you could bribe people with it, you could be bribed by it, you could, all kinds of things. So what OMB's recent grant proposal, their kind of change in policy is aiming to do is to try to take away from the appropriators their power to say what they want funding to go to. And the appropriators also don't say, fund this exact project. They do it as a process, right? So what the grant kind of proposal is trying to do, the grant regulations are trying to do, is take that away and also have it based on whatever the political appointees at the time want to do. Now, you and I were both political appointees. We maybe even kind of helped put out a notice of funding or a request for proposals. But in my world and all the times that I've done these jobs, you then back away and you let a process play out. Also because that's the fair way to do it. And these processes get litigated often. So in procurement, if you're the losing bidder, you can actually ask for the score sheets. You can ask for the transparency that everyone deserves to understand how their government is working. That's another reason why I would recommend political appointees stay away from that process. And so this is not just a norm breaking. This is actually redefining what it means to actually put something out to bid and purchase it.
There's actually a merit review board
Yeah.
for each funding opportunity announcement, and it actually evaluates on scientific merit, and then it goes up to the decision making. Am I right?
Well, I would think of it as more of an inform. So you've been inside Department of Energy, so perhaps things were maybe a little bit differently there. You can kind of sort of give guidance to career staff who are doing this work, but once they run their process and they have scores, nothing is black and white. Of course, there's always like something that's you can always ask to see, but I think of it more as like they're informing you where the process landed, not do you agree, yes or no? So that's, it's just a basic principle of procurement. So, that kind of process is basically good government. It is a good government practice, a good practice. It's also a good private sector practice. If anyone's ever heard of a scandal happening in the private sector where someone gave their friend a contract who didn't qualify for it, or, those are the kinds of behaviors that can also get somebody fired in the private sector as well.
We're going to open it up for questions with like 10 minutes remaining. I know there's no clock. If someone could help me with a 10-minute beat, that'll be great.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at this OMB right now, it is different, as you pointed out. If you were to, somewhere in the future there'll be a different administration. If you want to bring back the norms, do you want to bring back all the norms in the past, or maybe some of them could have been improved? What would you do?
I think it's an opportunity if there's ever a change in administration and in Congress to retake a look at how to do this work and streamline it, make it easier, faster, bring in some of the principles that we've all learned from DARPA, from ARPA-E, where you can have a quicker and in conversation with people with entities who are bidding in private sector and getting funding out there. So I do think there's lots of room for improvement in these processes. I do think there are fundamental principles and values that we should not change, which is that political appointees should not be personally making decisions based on what is happening right now, you guys. Just so you know, I work for the governor of California. What is happening right now is funding is being withheld from only blue states. We have $2 billion of healthcare funding that we've already spent that is being withheld. It is being withheld for fraud reasons, but California has an incredibly robust, probably best in class fraud detection and kind of set of staff that actually go after fraudulent schemes in healthcare billing. We are so good that other states are trying to do what we are doing. We are using AI to help us find fraud. We're doing everything we can. So there's not an issue with fraud. There will always be fraud, but that is not a legitimate issue. When we looked across at the states that funding was being withheld in these categories, it was all blue state governors. So we need to understand that there are some principles and values, and that when you're the president for the whole country. So for those reasons, I would say we need to bring back some of that process. No one likes bureaucratic process, but the process is there to protect this from happening, which is illegal, and we're fighting it in the courts. But so I just, so I do think there's an opportunity to, I'll say, build back better again. But I want to make sure that we don't lose some of the underpinning values of how to create a government that is accountable to everybody, not just the people who elected you.
Do you think, given what we are seeing now, and clearly the relationship between universities and the federal government is a little strained right now, as we can, to put it mildly, actually. Nevertheless, given what we are seeing in terms of pushing the norms, I mean, what we have been reminded of is that there are laws which you cannot violate, and then there are norms. And the US government, the executive branch and the interaction between all the three branches, these norms were kind of taken for granted, which are being tested now. You think this test that we're going through should lead or would lead some amendments in the Constitution or in the law itself? You think that is necessary, given what we're going through?
I think we can make certain things stronger. The other thing I want to just say as a kind of an aside, California as a state, as you know, is the fourth largest economy in the world. California, our tax revenue, we contribute to the federal fisc, the federal budget, $80 billion more than we receive back in federal benefits of any grant. University grants, Medi-Cal, you name it. We are a net contributor to the entire country. Okay, so we could make those laws stronger to make sure that where you need to, where Empowerment Act, where you need to pay something is being appropriated, must be spent. Those laws can be made stronger. But norms are about the culture and our value system as a country. And that is fought out, and I hate to say it, in the political economy and in our politics. So if we would like our government to be more accountable, we have to hold it accountable. And the only way to do that is to make your voice heard. And that's what we do in elections, and that's what we do all along, right? So unfortunately, that is the hard work of democracy. But we have to rise to a little bit of a higher level here in how we operate and expect that from our colleagues and from the people that we do work with and from the economies that we work in. Because when you start stripping away what is being stripped away on norms, you have to ask yourself, what do you really want? What are you left with, right? We have built the fourth largest economy in California by believing in institutions, by believing in Stanford and believing in UC, believing in research, investing in it, creating the conditions for innovation and for people to feel confident that if they're coming to work with a company here or with a university here, we're good for what's our end of the deal. I don't think we want to strip those norms away, but that is kind of what is happening for the United States, our government, the federal government. So that's unfortunate,
So it seems to me that these norms, underlying the norms is a sense of trust.
Yeah.
And the trust between the institution, and that trust is being tested right now. And frankly, at least when I was there in Washington, and today's Washington is very different, because the trust seems to have been compromised in some cases. How, given the fact that you were in the federal government and also looking at the state government right now, there's a federal state trust that you were talking about, and there's an internal within the Beltway trust that is being tested. In the future, how should we be thinking about rebuilding trust? Because Washington moves at the speed of trust.
I think one thing that's looming over us that we're not really considering is the effect of how people get their information in the economy that we live in now, which is social media, right? So I'll give you a little bit of a story here, and then I don't have the answers, but I'll tell you how we're dealing with it in California, I guess. When LA caught on fire, it was the worst, some of the worst fires in history, and Altadena, Eaton Fire, Altadena burned down, Pacific Palisades burned down, parts of Malibu burned down. What the governor noticed immediately, this was like 2 Januaries ago, December to January, was that a lot of misinformation, disinformation was coming out much faster than we had ever seen it before. And that was disinformation and misinformation that was actually putting people in harm's way because the fires were raging for a long time. So he started immediately a social media campaign in California Facts and started putting out the tweet or the Truth Social thing that was not true and immediately responding to it with the truth. Now you can take that for however you want to. If you're a conspiracy theorist, you'll believe that the water wasn't turned on and we didn't like turn on a big golden spigot and whatever. But we actually fought each thing, each lie with the truth. And that kind of rapid response, we've continued it since then, because we faced last June the president nationalizing the California National Guard, which the governor is supposed to be in charge of, and putting it in LA and starting riots there. It was bananas. So we're beyond, I'm going beyond trust in government. What I'm saying is that communication is incredibly important, and communication from a trusted source. So we all have a responsibility to do that. We're in a world where people are upset, angry, feeling like there isn't hope, and we are supposed to be the people who can help bring that into a different mindset, a mindset where you can start to trust and understand. And I think the basics of that are accountability and transparency. So wherever we can in California, we basically show our work. And people can take it how they want to, but we do that so that people can understand, like, we know you don't trust us, but we're gonna continue to show you things so that you can understand what we're doing. And that is what happens when you're elected or appointed into a public office. You are, duty bound to show that kind of work and to show that kind of transparency, accountability, and communication. And I also feel like we have to just break through a little bit of everybody on their phone and on social media and just be humans again. So I'm hoping we can do that. And I think it's hard to get trust back once you lose it, but you just keep trying,
Well, if you have any questions, please line up behind these microphones.
Yeah.
Let me just ask, so you're now the cabinet secretary in Sacramento.
Yep.
With Governor Newsom. I think you're taking over from Ann Patterson,
Yeah.
who is actually a visiting scholar at
yes, that's
Stanford,
right.
at the Doerr School.
Yep.
So we hope when you're done, you could spend some time out here. Even though you're a Cal graduate,
Go
we
Bears.
are fine. We accept Stanford Cal graduates. Tell us what are you thinking of in this role that you have? What would you like to achieve, and what are the things that that's on your plate?
So there are many things on my plate. If you have watched our governor over the last 7 years, he has a very broad agenda. And so there are several things you may or may not be tracking. The legislature in California is in session till August 30. And so we are running with 2 feet to try to pin down what we can through that process to make sure that the many things the governor wants to do actually come to fruition. And so what's most exciting for me is looking at some of the work we've been doing in what we call innovation economy. And so we are very much involved in, we had launched last year a quantum initiative with the UCs. We're very much involved in looking at options for Cal Compute, which we talked about a little bit in something Fei Li helped us with, which was a Frontier AI legislation last year. So we're doing some, I would call that offensive. On the defensive, we're also dealing with our posture on cyber and AI cyber. So there's sort of, these are just a little taste of some of the things we're doing in the state government, but really trying to make sure that if the governor made a promise, my job is to make sure that he gets out of here with promises kept. So we're tracking across a whole bunch of areas.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Let's go with the questions from, we'll oscillate between the two sides. keep your questions brief, and yeah, please, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. With your time at OMB, I'm just curious, because the U.S. debt levels have risen to the same level as GDP.
Yeah.
So what are these checks and balances in terms of OMB interfacing with Congress, interfacing with the Treasury, interfacing with Federal Reserve to help keep some of these checks and balances in place? Because we could have runaway spending. I mean, we certainly have more time. And I'd say every single administration, Democratic or Republican, have continued to shoot up the debt levels in this country. And so because of that, it's worrisome. So how do you account for the interest calculations? Is that calculated into OMB's budget? And just
We got it. Okay.
All of those
Debt.
things. For a little bit of history here, since we are at a university, the only administrations that have brought down the deficit and debt in any significant way were Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, and a little bit Joe Biden. So if you look at history, modern history, you'll see that when I left the Clinton administration and when Clinton left his final, I left there in 1997. We passed the Balanced Budget Act of 1997, which actually left surpluses as far as the eye could see. And what happened was we got a new president in, and there was a war, but also a bunch of tax rebates. And so the difficulty with the debt and the deficit is this changing over back and forth, right? I do think it's a problem and a challenge that people have thought about for a long time. But the spending, and we know how to do it. We did it in Bill Clinton. We balanced the budget. So there's a mechanism and a way to do it. There needs to be the political will to do it. And the difficulty is if you do it, then someone may take your surplus and spend it, which is what I saw happen to what we did in 1997.
Wait.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Hello. My question is that in the recent years, the president's direct influence on the OMB has challenged Congress's power of the purse. And so some may call for, say, a semi-independent agency overseen in condominium between the president and Congress in order to distance this power, in order to curb the ability of individuals like Russ Vought to directly put political preference into funding decisions. However, much of the OMB's power, as opposed to, say, the Congressional Budget Office, and its ability to make decisions and influence and organize the function.
What's your question? Come to the question. Yeah.
If the OMB is made semi-independent and it loses that direct contact with the administration, how much will be lost in terms of organizational interface?
Yeah, thank you for that. We do have an independent agency that is aimed at holding the executive branch accountable for its decisions. It's called the General Accounting Office, and it has been also weakened. So I don't know that you change the way the box is structured and get a different outcome here. I think we need to hold Congress accountable to have their power of check and balance of the purse strings, as we also hold the executive branch accountable to what it does. So I'm not sure moving OMB would be helpful in this instance, but it's an interesting idea.
Question over here.
Thank you.
Keep the question brief.
Of course. I'll be super brief for that.
Okay.
Jacqueline, Army background somehow. Now working in emerging tech investment. So my question would be, what makes a public-private partnership actually scalable rather than just successful pilots?
So there's probably multiple answers to that question. What makes a public-private partnership scalable? I will say that to do hard things in the public sector, you need a good idea, you need accountability, and you need capacity, right? So I think back to some of the bonds that have been passed to do public-private partnerships and research. I would say there's much to be learned from how we set those bonds and that funding up, but that would be a scalable, successful partnership. So there are many. And here's the thing about public-private partnerships. Sometimes they are not scalable, and that's actually okay. They're not designed to be so. So it just depends on what you're going for. But if you want scale, I would say look to the bonds and how we've been funding research in California, and that's a really great way to look at it, both in emerging in technology and in science.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah.
I'm getting all kinds of signs that we need to. This could have gone a long time. This was. Let's give a big round of warm applause to Nani. Thank you so much for being here. And as I said, this could have gone on a long time. We'd really appreciate your insights on this.
Yeah,
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Yeah.